Over the past few years, GTM teams have done everything right. They have brought the tools, built the workflows, hired the ops to manage it all, and yet everyone still feels overwhelmed.
I have seen organizations as small as, doing $5 million, maybe having 30 plus tools in their GTM stack itself. AI needs to kind of come in and become this intermediary layer, which consults, which strategizes, helps in setting up these automations.
The day one you do a pitch slap, you have just lost the deal forever.
We are talking about not just hiring signals or like job signals. We are talking about every single comment a person has left on a Google review, G2 review, anywhere of that sort.
In 2026, the problem is not the data or the accounts that you can get. So maybe the next decade isn't about building or adding more tools, but about replacing the stack with systems that actually execute the work. Hi everyone, and welcome to the ONEGTMLAB podcast. Today's episode comes from a question I keep asking and keep coming back to. Over the past few years, GTM teams have done everything right. They have brought the tools, built the workflows, hired the ops to manage it all, and yet everyone still feels overwhelmed. So I've been wondering, what if the model itself is broken? What if instead of stitching together 10 different tools, you could just tell one system what you want done and it actually does it? And to explore exactly that, I am joined by Sayanta, founder of nRev. He's built and scaled before, from marketplaces to multi-location operations, and now he's rethinking how GTM execution should actually work in an AI-first world. nRev is not another workflow tool. It's what he calls an AI team you delegate GTM to. So, Sayanta, thank you so much for coming here and taking your time. Welcome to our podcast.
Thank you, Shruti, for having me. It's a pleasure being here.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a good sunny day today. We'll get right into what's actually broken in GTM. And I want to start simple, but I do want to focus on a couple of things that I spoke about, which is from the outside, GTM teams today look incredibly well equipped, right? More tools, more automation, and there's a lot of data than ever. But why does it still feel like nothing is actually getting easier, even when teams are juggling 8 to 10 tools at the same time? What do you think where's the gap here right now?
It's a broad question, so I'll try to break it down into certain parts for sure. Look, like in the past decade, we've seen a huge rise of the myriads of GTM tools that are available in the market, and I think all of us, as we get into scaling up different motions, different strategies, we've always relied on some kind of workflows or some kind of automations that were built into SaaS of the last decade. There are a few problems with those structural SaaSes that are there. I call it structural or prescribed SaaSes because if you look at any tool from the past, you will notice that, they used to prescribe a certain workflow to you. A SaaS used to come with a certain framework. And, having built SaaS in the last decade, I mean, the advantage of or the selling point of SaaS was always that we've learned over hundreds of organizations, how hundreds of organizations have solved a certain problem and then built a workflow that solves that problem in other organizations in a repeatable manner. However, as we kind of progress in this current decade, we've realized that GTM has become a lot more nuanced. It's difficult to stand out. It's difficult to keep the internal functions aligned with the kind of workflows and automations that you have. So this
Right.
prescriptive framework of SaaS, I feel, has become a big problem. One, because it tells you it always has a certain way of doing things. And second, of course, like it's always been the case that when you have a SaaS, it's always kind of surrounded by a certain kind of data structure that it's adherent to, which means that it's very difficult to transfer that data or fluidly talk to other SaaS and make it all work together, given a certain motion or a strategy that you kind of want to work on. So I feel like what has happened currently is that we've bought over 20. I have seen organizations as small as, doing $5 million, maybe having 30 plus tools in their GTM stack itself, right? Often you don't even know that you have 2 or 3 tools for the same task.
Same thing.
And different teams in GTM are probably doing the same task using 2 or 3 different other tools, right? So now the thing is that none of this data is talking to each other. None of these, I've recently just came across this story where I've seen that, just in the outbound process, there was this one team doing event-based outbound and another team doing, let's say, LinkedIn-based outbound. And they had no clue that the same person was being reached out in multiple different manners in different contexts. So that's the confusion that starts arising when you have such complicated stacks in place.
Right.
So, yeah, I think what has started happening is these silos are still lying as silos and they're not breaking and they're not functioning. And the term orchestration has come out quite well in this decade. So they're not orchestrated together. And that becomes a huge problem, I feel.
Right. I think you mentioned it very correct. There's a huge disconnect with the kind of tools teams are using for the same thing, or maybe the intent is the same, but the output is super complicated and it's messy. As you mentioned, you are reaching out to two from two different events and two different intentions, but with the same person, right? So I had a follow up on that, but I think you answered it really well. At what point does more tools actually start slowing teams down? And I think this is exactly how we do not see the outcome that we expect these tools to come out with, right? So just can you share one insight on that? Like typically what more tools actually start slowing team down?
Honestly, I feel when you're constantly looking to scale up your ops teams, that's the point where you realize that you're just spending more time on maintenance of the tools rather than, them deploying strategies or everyone thinking about pipeline and closure at the same point in time. I
Right.
feel like 5 to 10 years down the line, or even sooner than that, it's very difficult to predict nowadays the timelines. But I feel like very soon, strategists and operators are going to be the ones who are the most valued people who understand how to build flywheels and how to build different GTM motions, maybe experiments that work. Ultimately, the operation should be becoming minimal and as streamlined as possible.
Right. No, absolutely. And I love that. So hold on to that thought as well. We also talk a lot about automation these days, which is really just workflow builders right now. But you connect tools, define steps, set triggers, and call it automation, right? This is what is happening in the current status quo. But someone still has to maintain it. There has to be a person. But do you think workflows are fundamentally the wrong model for GTM execution, or is there any other way to actually tackle this?
Look, automations are required no matter what. And you want those automations to be deterministic, right? You don't want those automations talking to a system of record in a eccentric manner, taking random set steps
Yeah.
when it feels like taking random steps. So you need determinism, you need auditability, or if I don't know whether that's a word, but you need to make sure that you're able to audit every step. And you also busy work or grunt work to reduce as much as possible. Right. So systems taking over at least the daily repetitive work that is going on. But there is another layer to it. You want this system to also be a little smart when it's required to be smart, right? Which means understanding your systems of record, understanding the type of business you're operating, and being able to come up and tell you what is probably required at a certain given point in time. So, yeah, workflows are essential for automation, but you want a little more fluid kind of a system when you're experimenting, when you're, macroing out of your, business standpoint. So those are the things that I feel goes hand in hand. And maybe we'll probably even dive deeper into at least my opinion of what an ideal GTM system should look like. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of interesting thoughts in the market about how GTM will evolve with AI.
Many conversations, I tell you. I think this one might change like a couple of people's perspective around how to actually go about GTM engineering and how it can be solved, and it's not that technical. So we'll get to that in a couple of questions down the line. But there's this insight that has literally changed everything for me. So every founder I've spoken to has that one moment where something clicks and you can't unsee it. And for you, coming from Pearson, if I'm right, and scaling operations across so many locations, you have seen execution at scale up close. But what was the moment where you realized the whole way of doing GTM in the current, maybe 2020, we are talking, right, shouldn't not how it should work? And what would you say it should be the right way, ideal way to actually GTM working?
Yeah, I think Pearson was a long time back, but I'll go back to our MindTickle story and the first 2 years of our journey into building nRev. So MindTickle, I mean, us co-founders used to head three different verticals. We like saw the business growing from 1 to 50 million, had the front row seats of understanding what kind of problems they were tackling. I don't know whether it's fortunate or unfortunate. When we started at the end of 2022, like more than 3 years back now, we're right at the inflection point of when GPT launched. And like a common founder story in SaaS, you're typically into services first, trying to figure out going deep into a problem and then trying to figure out what is repeatable, what works across different customers. The same was the story for us. I think that light bulb moment was at a point, it wasn't a moment, but I think it came in looking back at a few months, a few retrospection. Uh, in retrospective sessions, what happened was I think we were continuously building these N10 and Clay workflows as service partners for different organizations. And we realized that organizations were looking for automations without bearing the brunt of it all the time or carrying the baggage of it all the time, which is why at some point they didn't want to hire ops people. They wanted done for you services at the end of the day with such complex tools, right? So that there's this maintenance factor, there's this consultative factor, there's this understanding or that technical factor in terms of building out these, complex workflows or complex engines. And then again, your like connecting system, it was just not clay. You were connecting a clay to an instantly to a ZP, or like you were connecting something like a, some kind of an enrichment system to, let's say, and make.com to something else, right? And then there were like tools in the middle like Slack, etc., which were again kind of causing those points of friction, etc., in kind of setting up those systems. And what we realized was the only reason our services was working was because of the complexity in the requirements as well as the complexity in the systems that we were building. Now, we were earning money out of it, but it was also a dilemma in our minds, right? Why should this be a case? I think that was a semi light bulb moment or a kind of light bulb moment for us when we realized that the world needs to change a little bit, especially with the progress in AI that is happening. AI needs to kind of come in and become this intermediary layer, which consults, which strategizes, and then kind of helps in setting up these automations. And of course, like post those automations, maintain it, etc. So I think that was kind of a moment where we started envisioning a world which was a little different.
Right. So basically, what we come to a conclusion is teams don't usually ask for workflows, they ask for outcomes, right? They want the things to be automated, but they don't know how. So I think
Exactly.
that's the whole point. And with the AI wave, I think every single thing, every single task we focus on gets changed. And it has changed. Like it has typically changed how we look at GTM, how we look at other things as well in marketing. So that is something that has actually changed. But I want to come to a bigger question now, and I want to make this real about what exactly is nRev. And if someone meets you at a conference and asks, hey, what does nRev actually do? What you're building at nRev, what would that be?
So we kind of place it as nRev being an AI GTM operating system. What I mean by that is that it has or it develops context about your business. It learns from GTM, let's say strategies, motions, and flywheels of businesses that are using nRev, and thereby helps you experiment and then make motions repeatable. So it's not workflows. It has a number of different angles. Few problems, if I look at the central pillars of what how we built out nRev, was one, as you mentioned, Shruti, like in the current world, a lot is changing. I think one place where a lot of GTM strategists and operators come to a boundary towards their imagination is you often don't know what is possible. Right now, at that point in time, learning from others become a very, very important part. What are others doing that can really stretch the boundaries of our imagination and thus execution? So it's a system that learns from all these different types of GTM strategies that are earning value. It consults based on the situation and the scenario of a business. So it has idea of not just your business, but your systems, as in your data, etc., to kind of tell you where your funnel's leaking, which part of the funnel might be best to focus on right now. And thirdly, then it builds out automations and consults you how to build out which strategy. So it's a sounding board. It's not just a one-way instruction that builds out a certain workflow for sure.
Right. And I love the fact that because you mentioned it suggests as well on what you want, and there's a factor like you don't know what is possible. It can be scary, but then it can be exciting as well because there are certain complex situations, especially for technical teams, where you don't know till where you can actually think. So I think
Exactly.
having something, what you're building at nRev is gonna be super helpful. It is super helpful for so many teams. We have seen the customer stories as well. So I do have a follow up on that for the people who are non-technical, for the people who don't get that complicated tech part. So how easy is it for the non-technical teams in GTM to actually use nRev?
I think the best example is we've all had conversations with LLMs today, no matter what, right? So it's as easy as that. And one thing that I also wanted to kind of touch upon here, since you asked the easiness, was this an empirical evidence of how important it is for us to kind of get an understanding of where our imaginations can stretch up to.
Yeah.
We all know, Shruti, right? Today, events are becoming more, let's say, more prolific than ever, and more people are kind of attending events more than ever, right? That is because today human to human conversations teach us what is possible there. And then we wanted to bring in this angle of possibility as well. Um, Basically, when you're having a conversation, think of it like as a 100-year-old GTM operator who has learned through 10,000 plus, different motions that people are talking to it about. Of course, not revealing who is doing what, but at least
Yeah.
understanding situations at which different motions are gaining value and gaining more moss as it rolls down. So yeah, I mean, it's as simple as that. It's a conversation that you have with the system to kind of then build out different experiments and bring about repeatability to it.
So basically, you are saying that nRev is the AI team you delegate GTM work to.
Yeah, and also have maybe a good conversation with is like, I mean, what I was saying, it is on one part, there's a delegation bit, which it completely takes up, but there's also the part which helps you kind of brainstorm, which helps you shoot off ideas and get stuff like experimentally done, at least initially.
That's amazing. So basically, we all have to be really great at our prompts, and the work it comes up with is gonna be solving the problems that we are facing in GTM. Is that what it is?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, today, so we analyze the different kinds of conversations people have on the platform, right? Uh, we've come and seen that, people have asked, what are the next top 5 leads I can get for myself? And this could be from an SDR, this could be from even, let's say, someone who is doing lead gen at a very ops level, coming and
Right.
asking, what are the top 5? So it then actually kind of analyzes the situation to tell you whether it's warm network that you need to chase or whether it's a competitive network that you need to chase or whether it's something else altogether based on the kind of situation and business that you have. So yeah,
Right.
I think it's very situational, it's very suggestive, conversational, and it takes it from there.
Love that. And I would prompt everybody who's listening to this podcast to actually try it and let us know how easy it makes your whole GTM workflows at all. And would love to add all the links in the description. So feel free to check it out. And also, I'll be adding the link to Sayanta's LinkedIn, and you can DM all the questions to him directly. Moving on to a couple questions around Sayanta, I've heard you talk about signals a lot on your LinkedIn post. I do stalk your LinkedIn. It's amazing. You're doing a great job there. But most teams right now still operate on lists like accounts, leads, and contacts. So why do you think that model is outdated? And like, what are the chances when you move from lists to signals? Is it gonna reduce the need for teams to manually build it and maintain list across tools? Like it's super complicated, right? So can you share your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I'll actually break this down, and it's again a little bit nuanced, this question. So,
Yeah.
it's never like a black and white choice that you have. I think I'll give you the example of the outlier. So, if you're like I'll take even names for example. If you're a company like Innovasa, which has probably 300 out of the Fortune 500 health tech companies that you're targeting, now you have a named list of accounts that you definitely need to go behind, right? So then it becomes a hybrid situation where you have lists plus signals. But if you have a huge TAM, like for example, you're chasing all SMBs that are operating in a certain industry across the US, let's say all supply chain players that are there across the US, and that would probably be in the numbers of tens of thousands. Now, there what used to be a scenario before this was used to be something called TAM building. TAM building was a activity that used to happen where you kind of measure that entire TAM, then try to segment it with smaller ICP criterias to get to a smaller part of that TAM, and then kind of figure out probably what's common there, what kind of messaging I can have, and move ahead from there. I think the world's changed a little bit from there. And like this, we've been hearing for the last 5 or 6 years easily that, only 5% of the market is in market to buy an offering that you might be selling. Now, you need to capture that 5%. I mean, there are two ways to look at it. One is that you always remain in the top of mind for 100% of your audience, or you try to make it a little more prioritized outbound effort towards that 5% who are in market. Right? So it's a choice that there up to people. I just feel it's more logical when we think first principle that it's a better choice to go out and figure out who is in that 5%. Of course, that will not be that exact 5% who are there in the market, but then you can go out a lot more strategic at a very high scale. What I mean by that is when you know a situation in which a customer typically makes a decision to buy an offering like yours, you are more well equipped to capture these signals, which will give you an idea of who else is in that situation. You're basically replicating a buyer journey of someone who has bought an offering from you. Now, this gives not just an idea of who to reach out to first, but also gives you a lot more complex context about how you need to reach out to them.
Right.
What you can empathize more with the person you're reaching out to. I mean, no matter whether it's B2C or B2B, it is always selling to a person, not an organization, right?
Absolutely.
Then when you're empathizing a lot more, I feel that the chances of you getting to have a conversation and then a longer conversation, and then let's say, I mean, sales comes much later, but at least getting that
Right.
conversation initiated becomes a lot easier.
Right. I think it's a step by step process, and but the day one you do a pitch slap, it is you have just lost the deal forever. But yeah, it's a step by step process. It takes time to build that connection because you're talking to a person. You're not talking to you're not talking to a wall, right? You keep pitching the sales pitch and expect them to convert. That's not how things are
Yeah. And
happening.
I think it's become even more important now when every bit of data is commoditized, everyone's emails available to anyone. You can probably have a million emails shoot out every day, but not have single eyeball on it, unless you have that scaled, hyper personalized way of reaching out to these people. And that has become enabled a lot more with AI. I mean, breadcrumbs of data previously was impossible to find. We are talking about not just hiring signals or like job signals. We are talking about every single comment a person has left on a Google review, G2 review, anywhere of that sort. You're talking about communities, what people are talking about different communities, not just LinkedIn, but anywhere else. You're talking about where there are certain initiatives by a certain CEO, CTO being mentioned, which can percolate down to a certain department. Yeah, I mean, you're talking about probably in cybersecurity, let's say government regulations ensuring that there are certain breaches that need to be reported and hence more around it. So it's very industry specific. More than industry, I think it's even more company specific. So you need to be very, very custom in trying to understand that situation of your buyer and then track them across their buyer journey. Yeah, I think
Right.
even signals used to be there since the days of Tencent and Six Sense, since 2015 or 16, right? But I think it has evolved to a large degree. You can't just call up a John and say that noticed you're hiring PDRs. That's the worst form of email or a cold call you can make.
Right. And I think in 2026, the problem is not the data or the accounts that you can get. I think we have enough to actually get that everywhere. But the problem is how you reach out to the accounts that you already have, how you reach out to the teams that the list that you have built or, the people that you have finalized to actually reach out to. So that hyper personalized version of reaching out is something we need to take it very seriously because I still keep getting, and I think I'm like, come on. I still keep getting, sales. The first interaction I'm ever having with this XYZ company and they're just talking about their product. I'm like, no. Even if I might like that tool, even if that the tool might solve my problem, but the way I've been reached out is not connected. We are not connected on a human level. So I think that's what, to summarize what you just said, I love that. And I think it's so simple to understand now that you have explained it, that people listening would also be able to understand how and in what direction GTM is going in 2026 and beyond. You have been building such a great tool that's beyond what used to happen the pre chat GPT era or, AI tools era. So that's something we need, a literal hybrid of both of the things, that you have the human touch, but then you have the accessibility of automation to actually fix that. So thank you for sharing your bit on that. Yeah. So, one more thing that you mentioned in the last question is actually teams keep building lists, they keep building dashboards, but then nothing happens. Like there's no action after that. So, can you tell me how nRev actually closes that gap, or what happens between, once a signal is detected and how the teams take action through that?
Yeah, I think this is a very vicious loop in which a lot of companies who are even instrumenting signals to a very nuanced degree are still stuck at. Any signal without being actionable is of no use, right? So it is important to understand how your team would be able to action on signals the best, or
Right.
whether it would be certain kinds of automation that would work well. Now, I'll definitely point out that there is a lot of nuance here, which is why I also feel like prescriptive tools, signal tools kind of struggle a little bit when you get into organizations who are trying to delineate that outcome to that platform. Um, The problem is that I have seen like teams function in extremely different manner. In certain cases, I've seen that there have been Slack notifications that come in from signals. There is a human in the loop to approve which leads and which signals make sense for them. And then it automatically gets redirected to an SDR team with auto-composed emails or sequences. But I've also seen that this entire system without any approval or human in the loop automated to an extent where it already triggers into instantly a tool like instantly and gets triggered. And also on the side, you have LinkedIn automations kind of sending out these
Right.
messages. Now, this is something that is up to teams to understand which kind of system would work for their teams, especially in very large organizations reaching to enterprises. You would want a lot more humans in the loop because you don't have unlimited time. You want to make sure that your channels are not exhausted without some scrutiny into the research that has gone in, the messaging that has come in. But in others where you're doing more transactional sales, where you have a huge TAM, where your ticket size is smaller, you typically can do it at a much more automated manner.
Right.
So yeah, I'll just put it that way, that it's kind of completely dependent on team to team, and there is experiment needed and iterations needed to make sure that this experiment scales up to something that becomes meaningfully viable in terms of outcomes.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to also take a look at from your point of view, like what are teams actually delegating and handing over to nRev right now? Like what are the common jobs or common just patterns that you have seen teams utilizing it from the day one of using nRev right now?
So there are a number, and I'll try to break this down into simple versus complex, right? Typically, certain complex use cases, we just kind of build it out as a template, and those are easy to customize for yourself. So certain brilliant ones are like tracking which prospects or accounts your competitors are chasing. This is by far, I've probably even spoken about it the most, being
Yeah.
the most handy automation that teams have established on nRev, but to also very simple automations. Like, for example, if I just want to find out who the right people in an organization are, for me, who my target audience is, they just have, let's say, a Slack channel where they just go in and say that, find me the right people in, say, an account like ONEGTMLAB. And it gets you, based on your target personas, gets you all the people tiered in terms of hierarchy as well as the personas that you look at. So those are the very simple ones that are going in. But I honestly feel that, like in the last few weeks, things have gotten even more nuanced. People have actually come up and done, warm LinkedIn outbound then like how I mean looked at how they can capture people who are interacting with their posts, how they can capture their existing network, because LinkedIn is typically a very restrictive channel in terms of automations, and rightly so. I mean, you don't want it to become a commercial platform instead of a social network. But yeah, how do you still leverage those limits that LinkedIn still put on you in terms of the number of new connections you can establish, etc.? So I think there's very brilliant nuances through which people have actually captured uh, more likely people to engage with you rather than kind of reaching out kind of completely cold in the dark. So these are some, I
Yeah,
think if I start talking about these, there'll be a ton more that comes out. But yeah, I'll just kind
I'm
of
sure.
try to restrict.
Yeah, but I got the gist, and people listening, they should definitely speak to their leaders or just talk into at least getting hands on nRev and see how they can fix their GTMs if they're not already doing that. But I
I think
have seen
most important.
yeah,
Right. I was just saying, most importantly, today in the world of 2026, and I'm sure 2077 is going to be more so, is that experiments and constant iterations on that experiments have become very, very important. Like, you don't know what's going to work for you in your exact business situation. So you've pretty much got to throw everything at the wall to know what sticks, right? So I think that part becomes very important because at every stage, your mediums change, your channels change, your flywheels change. It's a continuous experiment is extremely important, and that's what I would urge people to continuously do in their GTM.
absolutely. Instead of just still focusing on things that were relevant in 2020, I think that's something that you need to break free from. Yeah. So you mentioned a customer who cut close to 42K worth of tools. How many tools did they actually replace? That's kind of an interesting story that I would love to hear. And what did that tool stack look before versus after? You don't have to name call it, but yeah, would love to hear that story as well.
This was personally a big success because honestly, when you're cutting down, I think we cut down somewhere between 15 to 20. I think the exact number was 18 or 19, one of them. But the personal win was that there was absolutely no process break in this entire situation. None of their ground teams, like none of their field marketing, none of their growth teams, none of their sales teams or BDR teams felt that there was something that is broken even for a week, right? So that was a personal win that I felt that was there. Apart from the number of tools that were replaced, the situation of before and after was very well described by this RevOps champion that we had in that account. He said that today, when I have to try something new, I don't have to go through that entire process of approvals, of going to my CRO and asking him whether I can invest in another tool. And then there are like five more decision makers who come into this entire process of buying a tool. And then there's that entire implementation cycle. He wasn't even talking about that, but he was just saying that, that
Right.
huge burden of having to go through this process of like 6 to 8 weeks at a minimum to be able to even think about setting up that new process and without no experimental empirical analysis of whether it'll work or not became something that freed him up completely. I remember when he tried out signal based outbound, and that wasn't one of the tools that he had in place, was he didn't even establish it as an automation. He just asked our AI builder to collect certain breadcrumbs of information that would be suitable for his kind of business. And he just kind of let it out as just a manual effort to his group of A's and BDRs. He just said, would you run with these pieces of information? So that kind of gave him that leverage to kind of first see if it will ever work, even if his team will accept that kind of information or that process that he's looking to instate in that organization, and then kind of move ahead from there. So it becomes a lot more gradual, step by step, and then scaling.
Right, absolutely. Okay, so just one check. Do you think, like, are there too many questions, or do you want me to cut short the call? Just wanted to check in with you.
I'm fine with going on. Yeah, yeah,
Okay, perfect. Just because there are two more questions and then we can come to a close, but I hope we are good, right?
yeah, yeah.
Okay, perfect. So, one thing that stands out is you are not asking users to actually build workflows or write logic. I think you are asking them to just describe what they want, right? So, why is that shift, like from configuring tools to just describing work? Like, that's a huge shift on how we do work, right? Is such a big unlock. And who is actually benefiting from it the most?
I hope every team would benefit from it, honestly. But so why that shift is, I think, simple to answer. It's just that, I mean, AI is moving so fast that it can understand, can learn, can get more context, and then kind of build technical scripts, technical workflows from there. Which teams would benefit? I think any team which is not looking forward to throwing people at problems would definitely benefit from it. Like I mentioned, there comes a stage when just maintaining infrastructure becomes more important than experimenting, than trying out what's new in GTM. I think
Yeah.
any team that does not want to reach to that point needs to come to a situation where they're not using 20 tools. It could be anything, not just nRev, but it could be a Cloud Code, it could be any modern platform that is coming out, but definitely should not be looking at having just crowding their tool stack with more and more SaaS.
Absolutely. Yeah, so just zooming out a little bit because this feels heavy. I think there are too many things that we spoke about, but it's definitely that software is moving from the tools we use to systems we delegate work to, right? So building systems is the next big thing, and getting accustomed to working in that workforce is something I think we all would have to be skilled at, super skilled at. So I think that shift is actually smaller teams and faster execution. But do you have like one more addition to what it actually means, this actual shift?
No, honestly, I feel that it's not that humans need to adapt. I feel that AI is adapting more than humans are adapting
Yeah.
today. So I feel like yeah, the change is different. That yeah, there's more expected, but then there's also these new AI that is adapted to these smaller teams having execution as a core skill to kind of go out and execute on behalf of humans that are
Right.
coming in. So I honestly feel that yeah, the world is going to probably change towards leaner teams, but it's not going to be a huge monumental shift for GTM operators who are there thinking first principle.
Exactly.
in their logic.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Sayanta. This was such a super masterclass, if we can call it, around how GTM's teams have to adapt and what you have been building at nRev. Thank you so much for your time today. And I think if the last decade of GTM was about buying tools and building stacks, maybe the next decade isn't about adding more tools, but actually replacing the stack with systems that actually execute the work. And I think that's the bet nRev is making, right, Sayanta?
Yeah. And I honestly feel that the next decade is also about people's imagination just taking them beyond boundaries that they have got them.
Absolutely. Issue.
Yeah. I wasn't able to join this, sorry, Shruti. Yeah, now finally managed.
That's okay. No, the video is still recording, so I'll just cut this part. It's okay.
And the previous upload from my side is also continuing. So thank God that didn't get affected.
No, that it's still working. I think it still gets uploaded in the cloud for Riverside. So I think we are good. After I close it, maybe for 2 minutes, we can just see if everything is uploaded and then we can close the call. Like I'll stop recording after that. Hope that
Done.
works.
I think I got cut off in the last sentence, but that's all right. Yeah.
That's okay. I'll edit that part. So I'll just redo the ending again, and maybe we can like close this call. Okay.
If you need any bit of my help, I can just, yeah,
Yeah. I'll just ping you if there's something. But for now, I think we are looking good in the podcast. So
sounds good.
okay. So maybe the next decade isn't about building or adding more tools, but about replacing the stack with systems that actually execute the work. And I think that's the bet nRev is making, right, Sayanta?
Yes, and I also feel it's about just extending the barriers of imagination. It's about just people not thinking about the boundaries in which we think today. I mean, we can just let our imaginations flow, and I'm sure we can kind of achieve that. And I mean, AI can take over the execution bit and making that repeatable.
Absolutely. So if that resonated, check out nrev.ai and share this with the person on your team who's quietly actually holding together 15 workflows right now. Maybe that helps. But thank you for joining on GTM Labs podcast. And I'll be sharing all the links, and people who have questions directly, they can reach out to Sayanta, and all the links will be in the description. So see you in the next one.
Thank you, Shruti.
Thank you so much, Sayanta. I'm just